Good morning, everyone. My name is Brea Baker. I am the Chief Equity Officer at Inspire Justice, and I'm so excited to be joining you for this incredible convening and to specifically dive into some media trainings. It's so important now more than ever. I think we're all really clear that the wrong narratives and misinformation and disinformation spreading hurts our movements, hurts the practitioners, and hurts the frontline workers. And so we need to be committed to having a clear and concise message that really is resonating with people, that is compelling enough to push them to action, and that can shift the tides of the issues that we are fighting in. So before I jump into that, I'd love to share a bit more about myself, about the work that I do at Inspire Justice, and why you should care about this if you're not someone who has previously worked in media. And while I'm doing that, I would love for each of you to use the chat and introduce yourself to me, your name, your pronouns, a little bit about why this matters to you or what you are a little nervous about. But I want to make sure that you all are comfortable using the chat because we're going to have some question and answer portions later. And I want to make sure that you all feel really heard and I'm not just talking at you, but talking with you, which is actually good practice for the media training that we're about to go into. But a little bit more about me. Prior to being Chief Equity Officer at Inspire Justice, I was a angry young person who came into this work mostly working around policing and racial justice. And I was more working in grassroots organizing. And I got into media by accident, to be honest, because I just found myself more committed to finding the solutions and implementing the solutions that I thought needed to exist in the world. And I realized after a bit of time doing that work that it was so impossible to push people towards calls to action, to get people to understand why your demands are valuable and worth listening to, without having a strong communication strategy. And more so than that, I realized that we're in this vicious cycle where, decades and decades and, to be honest, centuries of BIPOC leaders have been sounding the alarm, naming the problems, highlighting the solutions, and they've been ignored. And I don't think that's because they don't have the right answers. I think it's because we have not had a mainstream that's been willing to listen to them. And now, in this unprecedented time where more people than ever have these really strong intentions. They claim to want to do the right thing and just need to know where they're pointed. We're losing the narrative fight. And so it's so important that we are able to meet our people where they're at and to champion them to our cause, as my mentor, Carmen Perez, says. So with that, I began working with an incredible social impact firm and creative agency, Inspire Justice, that works across a few industries, namely entertainment, though, to help reshape the norms that are telling people what is possible, what is impossible, what they need to be investing their time in, what is okay and acceptable, etc. And we all know that when you turn on your TV, when you are flipping through social media, when you are looking at magazines and articles, that we are being fed certain norms of what is okay in our society. And that has translated to gun violence rates, to mass incarceration, to a host of things that people are willing to make certain decisions based on the stories that they have believed. And so we at Inspire Justice really believe that the stories we do and don't tell matter a huge amount, and that we need to tell better stories so that the life that is imitating art is a life that is more just, that is more honest, that is more transparent, that is more equitable for all of us, right? And so that brings me to what we're doing today. What is the objective of our time here? I want to discuss how to deliver an effective message through media that is clear, concise, and confident. And the thing is there might be a few of you who are saying, I don't talk to media. That's not my gift. That's not my strong suit. I let other people handle that. But knowing how to convey a strong message is something that will help everyone. Even if you don't currently consider yourself a spokesperson for your organization, if you're not doing that through interviews and through media and through op-eds, you are still communicating the importance of your work, whether you're talking to donors, volunteers, board members, any stakeholders associated with the work that you do, they are going to want to know why this, why now, especially in the world we're in, where digital media is really pulling for all of our attention in so many different directions. And there's so many vital issues that are urgent right now, right? We have so many topics that people are wanting to understand more about, to build awareness and to do something about. And so if you are trying to kind of filter through that noise and come out on top and communicate to audiences why your organization or why the work that you're doing is worth following, you're going to need to have a really compelling message. And you're going to need to talk to people who don't always agree with you. And we're going to get into that, why it's important to not only talk to media who's aligned with you, but to figure out and navigate the relationship with oppositional media. And then lastly, we're going to focus our time on how we're actually going to talk to media. So once you figured out why it's important and what you want to do about that, we're going to actually talk about the anatomy of a really strong core message. And this is going to all be really, really brief. I don't have much time with you. And that is why I really want to make sure that you all are comfortable using that, chat box, because I want you dropping in questions, not just at the end, but all throughout, so that I can kind of hear what's resonating, what you're unsure about, what you want to learn more about, and we can try and fit all of that into this 30-minute segment. Does that feel good? Awesome. Awesome. And I know that you all are looking at a screen and you're feeling like, oh, well, I'm being talked at. But again, I'm trying to make this a conversation. So please, please, please jump in, whether you're hearing something and you're like, yes, I agree. And this is a moment where I got to apply that. Or interesting, I've often disagreed and I want to kind of challenge that or ask a question to kind of figure out how you got to that place. Again, please feel comfortable using that chat box. So let's dive in. Let's dive into why media. First and foremost, when you're talking to media that's aligned with your work, it's absolutely an opportunity to bring people onto your cause in a deeper way. You may have people who believe themselves to be liberal or progressive already, but are not actively taking steps in alignment with the demands or the policy goals or the general objectives of your organization. And so this is the easy part of talking to media, is convincing people who already care about the same values as you do, believe that the same problems are problems, but are now committed to doing something about it. And they're just like, okay, sign me up. What is the action step that I need to take? And that's a really, really great opportunity, because there's so many people who are sitting in their homes and are curious about these issues and are really attentive to these issues, but are wanting to amplify the real experts on the ground. And this is an opportunity to bridge that gap. They're not hearing from pundits. They're not hearing from theorists. They're hearing from those who are directly grappling with these issues every single day. And that's you all. And so we want to make sure that when they do hear from you, they hear a really clear, concise, and confident message about what they can do to better support your work, whether that's donating, whether that's volunteering, whether that's talking to their family members, whether that's becoming more aware of statistics, whether that's calling elected officials. What is that step that you want to push them to? And that's the opportunity when you're talking with media who already believe in the mission that you are championing. Now, when it comes to oppositional media or media that is trying to take a more neutral stance, there's still an organizing opportunity in that. And I want y'all to hear me out, because I know sometimes this can be a sore topic, but just thinking about the fact that we have millions of people who do agree with us and millions more who don't. And the only way that they are going to flip sides is if they hear a message that convinces them or that shares information that they didn't have before. And in a world where mis and disinformation is going viral every single day, we don't want to miss the opportunity to really meet those people where they're at. And if where they're at is talking to this podcaster or watching this YouTuber or listening to this more conservative news site, we want to still meet them there if there's an opportunity for us to champion them. Now, I do absolutely agree that we have to do some proper vetting. And so it's so, so critical that if you are getting inquiries from media that you don't believe are aligned with your vision and mission, or if you're just unsure of their intentions and their goals, are they trying to make a salacious clickbaity article? Are they really interested in the nitty gritty nuts and bolts of this conversation? Either way, there should be a really thorough vetting process where you get to kind of ask them questions about why they're interested in this topic right now, who else will be contributing to this conversation, how they found your work, and what questions they're interested in asking you. And if you feel like there is some level of benefit of the doubt that could be given, or you think there's still an opportunity that even if the interviewer or publication themselves can't be trusted, but that the audience that they reach is more important to speak to, then I think there's a really huge organizing opportunity to reach people who are consuming information from publications that are not often giving them your perspective. And so after you've done that vetting and after you've collaborated with others on your team to make sure this is the right opportunity, collaborating with oppositional media or doing interviews with oppositional media can provide a really, really, really great chance to connect with people who are not used to hearing from you. And especially if you can meet them where they're at and kind of convince them that you have more in common than you have not in common, but without diluting your message, I think there's a really, really powerful opportunity. And that's going to bring us to when you do or don't speak to media. So again, if you feel like you are being brought onto a certain publication or channel or media opportunity, and the intent is to embarrass you, humiliate you, pick apart your issue areas, to offend you and use harmful rhetoric towards you and audiences that you fight for, that's not going to be the right opportunity. But if you do believe that there's a chance to communicate with people who claim to care about the same things that you claim to care about, public safety, equity, autonomy, the ability to have sovereignty over one's own life and community, then starting with those values and then bridging out from there can be a really powerful way to kind of flip some people who didn't think that they would be receptive to your message. And how do we do that? I know it's really difficult, but there's a really awesome model that we can use no matter who we're talking to. And of course, we can cater it to the audience, but I think this is something that is really, really helpful across the board. And that's the VPSA model. VPSA stands for value, problem, solution, and action. I'm going to pause there because I know I'm saying a lot and I want to make sure you're getting this. VPSA stands for value, problem, solution, and action. And so with value, you want to start by appealing to the large scale issues that are at play here. And you can cater this. This is the part that actually really should be catered. If you're talking to people who you already know care about public safety, and you're just trying to get them to understand how the issues that you work around are connected to that value, then you want to start there. If you know that there are some things that you don't agree with, but the one thing you have in common is this one value, again, you want to start there. We're trying to bridge people before we push them away. And so you want to reel them in based on a shared value that you all have in common. And then based on that value, a direct correlation should be the problem. This problem should be a direct threat to the value that you just posed. So if you're talking to an audience that cares a lot about public safety, and then you bring up gun violence and why it's important for us to prevent gun violence, then you want to make sure that the problem you're illuminating is a very clear threat to the shared value that you've already acknowledged we all care about. And then from there, a direct solution. What are you championing and working on that is going to solve that problem and make it so that we all have better access to the value that we've all agreed we believe in and we want in our lives? And then finally, A is an action. So you've already talked about the solutions that you are doing and that you are taking, but what is an action that the audience can take in support of your solution? It might be the same solution. Maybe the solution you've took is building awareness personally and sharing that awareness with people in your life. Then the solution and the action can be really aligned. But maybe the solution is that you are leading violence interruption work, and the action is that you want people to help fund that work. Or the solution is that you have drafted a policy piece that has just been introduced by an elected official, and the action is that you want people to call other elected officials to co-sign and champion that and vote on that bill. So the solution and the action should also be really directly correlated. But again, you want to start with the shared value. What is something we all can agree we care about? Even if we're not agreeing on other things, we can all agree we care about this piece. We all want this for ourselves, our families, and our communities. But there's a problem that is threatening that. And I have a solution that is going to get us closer to the world we all agreed we want to be in when we name that value. And here's an action that everybody can take to get us closer to that value. Does that make sense? And if it doesn't make sense, I don't want you lying. I want you to drop that in the chat with any questions that you have about this. Now, I know this sounds a little formulaic in the moment, but the beauty is we start the work now to figure out a few common VPSA anecdotes that we can refer to. So when you get into an interview, you already know where you're going. You already know the shared values and the problems that you're going to share, the solutions and the actions that you want people to champion. And you also already know a few case studies and anecdotes that really illuminate this in a compelling way. It doesn't need to be, A plus B plus C plus D equals E. It can be really organic. You can really start by just saying, look, even before I got into this work, what I knew I cared about was that we all deserve safety. We all deserve to come home at the end of the night and to our loved ones without threat of violence. And unfortunately, police brutality is a huge threat to that violence. And I'm going to share a story about how I know that to be a problem. But here's a solution that I'm championing. And it's something that I believe that if we had more people who believed in it and who were aware of it, we'd live in a safer world where we all could achieve the safety that we care about. And so here's something that you all can do. Like, that's how you can kind of round it out and make it feel really, really natural, especially when you've gotten some time to practice it. But it's really beautiful to always know that you have some acronym to refer to ensure that you're hitting your marks. Did I name my value yet? Okay, I did name my value. I named my problem. Okay, now I've got to get into my solution. So as long as you keep that VPSA, value, problem, solution, action, in your back pocket, if you're in an interview, or if you're writing an op-ed, or if you're talking to a donor, or if you're galvanizing some volunteers and you're kind of losing your place and you're not sure where to go next, you can refer to that acronym to make sure that you're on that message. And I want to get into some messaging tips, some do's and don'ts as well, before I open it up to some of those questions, and we can play around with the VPSA model if there aren't many questions. But some big messaging tips outside of this VPSA model is that you want to answer the question that you want to answer. I mentioned that I'm the Chief Equity Officer at Inspire Justice. I'm also a journalist. And so I've been on both sides of the table. And I know as a journalist that our goal is to get you to say something that is really raw, is really thoughtful, is really compelling. And sometimes that means that we're asking questions that we don't know what answer you're going to give, but we hope that it's going to be something juicy. But if you know the answer you want to give and the question that's being asked is not getting you there fast enough, then you should answer the question that you want to answer. And I'll give you an example. And this is especially true when the question that you're asked is either phrased in an offensive way or just not on target. So maybe you go to questions like, tell us a little bit more about why we should care about policing and police brutality when people are more scared than ever. Now, maybe you don't like that you've been put in a situation where you have to position your work against police brutality as antithetical to public safety work. And so you don't want to answer that question in that way because it will lead audiences to believe that you can only choose one or the other. But the question that you want to answer is why addressing police brutality actually keeps us safer. And so instead of answering that question and reframing that question as it was given to you, you can kind of reframe it and say, I think this is bringing up a really good point, which is how do we achieve public safety without it coming at the expense of other people? And how do we ensure that BIPOC people and marginalized people are not the collateral damage for white people's safety? And to do that, we have to explore why we exist in this binary where the harm that police do is considered the necessary evil towards achieving safety for other communities. Now I flipped the question that they've asked, and I've started a question and a thread that I want to talk through, that I think is more valuable and is more nuanced. And it puts the interviewer on a little bit of the edge of their seat, because now they're like, ooh, okay, this is something I hadn't really thought about. And they're having to listen to what I'm saying, as opposed to trying to get me to fit the interview that they wanted to do. They are having to adjust to the work that I'm bringing to the table. So I think that's something, because I know a lot of people get really nervous when they get into an interview and they're asked questions that are asked in bad faith or are using language that they don't agree with. For example, let's say you work around immigration and you're being asked questions that use harmful rhetoric like alien or illegal. And so you want to reframe that and not dig into that. You've got to answer a new question. Another thing is you want to be really concise. Attention spans are really, really limited these days. People are jaded and exhausted and overwhelmed. And more than that, if you're participating in an interview that is not going to be live, your context could be trimmed. So the goal of practicing your VPSA model ahead of time is so that when you get in an interview, you have a canned 30 to 45-second answer that you can use that is strong and compelling. It hits all of your points. And you also know that you're not going to lose people by the time that you get to the exciting action and solution-oriented sections. Because if you only keep people's attention while you're naming the problems, you haven't helped them understand how you can be part of the solution. Another thing, which I'm sure I don't need to preach to you all about, but it's important I'd be remiss to not share, is that you must use people first language. Again, you're modeling to interviewers and to audiences how they should be talking about these issues. So even if your interviewer is using harmful language, you want to make sure that you're teaching them the right language. For example, if you get a question that says, why should we be allowing felons to vote? when you rephrase that question and answer it, you should say, it's really important that anyone in this country has access to civic engagement, but being formerly incarcerated or currently incarcerated should not absolve you of your right to be represented. And by shifting that language, again, you're modeling how people should be talking about the issues that you care about. And then lastly, I know that everyone I'm speaking to right now is someone who is an expert on these issues. You're either a practitioner, or you've been studying it, or you've been living it for years. But you don't want to use too much jargon where you talking about this issue becomes inaccessible to the people who are not subject matter experts. You don't want to participate in any interview or media that can require people to feel as though, oh, I'm not qualified to understand where this person is coming from. And what we found with the right wing is that they're really, really great at distilling a complex message down to some really succinct and concise points that anyone can understand. And even when they are kind of removing some of the nuance or dumbing it down too much, it is incredibly accessible to the audience that they're trying to meet. So you don't want to introduce new terminology without defining it for yourself so that others are not doing that for you. You also don't want to introduce jargon that's going to make people feel as though they don't have the prerequisites to participate. And the last couple sets of do's and don'ts: do come prepared to know your message, do vet and make sure you are the right person for the opportunity. Do refer to other people if they are better fits for the opportunity and for the messaging. Do keep your answers as short and simple as possible. Yes and no and I don't know are acceptable answers, but trying to fill in the blanks because you think that you should be saying more and potentially sharing wrong information or something that you haven't fully thought through can do more harm than a simple, I'm not sure about that, but it's important to follow the lead of people who might, and here are some people who you should be following up with. And lastly, if you do make a mistake, whether this is on air or not, do correct yourself. Don't say no comment, because that is a comment in and of itself. Don't say more than you need to answer. Do not lie or mislead a reporter. And don't assume that the reporter knows the issues, okay? You want to make sure that even if they're asking you questions, that you are constantly defining and resetting and making sure that you are coming from a 101 level of the issue so that you're not assuming anything. You also don't want to argue with the reporter. No matter how energized or aggressive they get, it always looks worse when it's the guest who kind of matches that energy. And it's much better to cut an interview short than to get into an argument with the reporter. Last few, don't give your personal opinion in a way that will be a reflection of the organization if you are an organizational representative, and don't think anything is off the record. Anything that you say to a reporter can and will be used against you. If you are nervous about that, some helpful tips are to record interviews yourself. If it's on air or not, you can have voice memo kind of going in your back pocket so that you can refer to what you said and see if there are any clarifications that you need to make or things that you need to confirm with your team that was shared accidentally. But don't believe that anything is off the record. And those are some of those quick tips. I want to just briefly recap what we shared and then open it up to some questions. So if you have not yet, please drop them in the chat and we'll jump into those. But again, it's so important to see talking with media and having concise messaging as an organizing opportunity. It's an absolutely transferable skill across all sorts of stakeholders and actors in this work. But also, we should not get complacent and believe that those who agree with us already is enough. We should always be looking to champion new people to our cause, to convince them that this is an issue worth fighting for, and that they should not only believe this in their heart, but they should take action in their day-to-day lives. And a really great way to ensure that you have strong, consistent messaging is to use the VPSA model to reiterate the values that you care about, the problems that are threats to those shared values, the solutions that you're working on, and actions that listeners can take to get involved. And so with that, I want to jump into some of the questions in the chat. One person asked how, in addition to your suggestions on working with oppositional media, are there any additional tips for effectively responding to misinformation about your court or program from local politicians or other stakeholders? This is such a great question. And I love that you specifically asked about what happens when this misinformation comes from people who are considered credible, who are politicians and nonprofit leaders and people with large platforms who are sharing a message that is very different from your own. I would say that the important piece is to first understand, is this person doing so with intentional malice, or do they not understand the issues well enough? If there's an opportunity to meet this person where they're at and to share a concise and compelling message with them that would have them speak to their audience in a different way, that's always going to be more compelling than to try and call them out and have them double down in the court of public opinion. So, for example, if there's a politician who's talking about issue areas that you are working in from a malicious place, and that is somebody who's a part of your party, and you just feel like, wow, I don't think that they know people with this lived experience or who's doing this work, and that could be the only reason they're doing this, then a conversation might be warranted. If you're feeling like this is coming from malicious people, then it's important to name that malice and name why they are not a credible resource on this issue area. Whether that's, hey, I don't think that you should be taking talking points from this politician because they're taking dollars from people who are invested in seeing there be cash bail, or who are invested in mass incarceration. Being able to name where that malice might be stemming from is so important, because it doesn't just have you appear to audiences as, well, I'm just not sure who to believe, but you're actually painting the picture of why this person is not credible, why they should not be listened to, and why you are a more credible person, because you work with people on the ground, because this is your lived experience, etc. But being able to point out where that misinformation is stemming from is really critical to people believing you over them, as opposed to just getting into this back and forth of like, no, listen to me, listen to me. And people are just not sure who is the person to believe. Another question is, how do we sell the community court model? I mean, I think with the limited time that we have, it's, if you're looking at the value, problem, solution, action, what is the problem that community court model is trying to solve? Where does that problem stem from? What is the value that's coming at that? We believe that everyone should have access to an equitable representation in this courtroom. Or we believe that, the criminal legal system railroads people, and it's so critical that we offer allyship to people. But really think as a team, what are the problems that you all are solving through this community court model? And what are some of the shared values that would work when you're talking to progressives, and then shared values that would work when you're talking to conservatives? And what I found is that at the end of the day, even if people don't want to admit it, we all care about autonomy. We all care about safety. We all care about living joyful lives. And if you can find a shared value that ties into the model you're leading, I think that will do a much better service than just trying to convince people without that shared value. Another question, how can we learn more about people first language? Yes, I think this is really great. There are so many organizations that lead training and development around accessible language. People first language can apply to so many different issue areas, but I think just knowing people first is a nice cheat code. If you're talking about incarcerated people, you should be saying people, not felon, not convict. If you're talking about people who are migrating, you should say that, not illegal alien, right? Asylum seekers, people who are seeking asylum. Like, you just want to make sure that you're centering the fact that we're talking about real human beings who are also having these shared values. If I'm talking about incarcerated people, those are not people who suddenly woke up one day and also don't care about safety. But what is the dynamic that we really need to reconcile at the core? But at the core of it, though, we should not forget that we're talking to human beings, and we all have very human lived experiences. And whether we're speaking or acting from a space of pain, or whether we're speaking or acting from a place of ambition and desire, or greed or joy, or whatever the case may be, there's some emotion that is fueling our work. And by centering people first language, you are giving yourself an opportunity to remind audiences that these are real people. These are not just numbers on a piece of paper, but we're talking about real people. So I feel like that's a good place for us to close. Thank you so much for spending some of your Friday morning with me. And as you shift into the afternoon sessions and talk more with practitioners about putting this work into practice, I hope that you keep that VPSA model tight and close to you. I hope that you remember that a compelling message is just as important as the actions that you are pushing people to, because an organization that has all of the answers and no audience who is believing that they have the answers is not effective. And so thank you for all of the work that you do every single day. Thank you for taking the time to sit here with me. And I hope that as you go into this work, you find new ways to communicate that work and its value to people who already agree with you, but are not taking as much action as you would like, and to people who could agree with you, but haven't yet. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your Friday. Bye.